Welcome back to Inspired Nation. I am stoked to have a very special guest, the actual first ever ex-Navy SEAL / BUDS instructor from the U.S. and Ryan Williams. I'm stoked to have you here. Welcome to the crew. Welcome to the Inspired Nation.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, man. It's a unique opportunity to talk to more people like you. So I like hanging out with you. So I'm good, man. Let's roll.
The fun part is you don't even know how here's how I discovered Ryan. So it's about, was it 3-4 weeks ago? We were down in Dallas, Texas at Justin Wegner's Backbone Swag fly-in. And I walk into this warehouse where Justin has all his t-shirts and everything. I'm looking around the room and I see Justin. And I'm like, I recognize him. I've seen him. I look over. I'm like, who's the fucking WWE wrestler? Freaking tattoos on his arm, just big old guns on his arms. I'm like, all right, here we go. So you brought nuggets, brought wisdom, and made kind of complex discussions into simplified them times 10, like broke them down to chunks. So welcome to the crew, Ryan.
Dude, thanks, man. Yeah, I found that being 44 now, there's not a whole lot of good things that come with being older, but I have noticed that after a while, like you start to recognize patterns, and the more patterns you see, the more you start to see the same problems over and over again. So you can start to apply like solutions that worked previously in one area. They're not going to be 100%, but you can usually find like an 80 or 90% solution and modify it and just solve problems a lot easier. It just makes perspective on life a whole lot easier once you can recognize that, most things are just another variation of something else.
Well, like you said, at the fly-in, you have bigger numbers, bigger decimals, so to speak, but it always turns into the same problems. You talk about people you hang out with, masterminds that you're a part of. You got Arate, you've got Sean Whalen's Lions Not Sheep, you've got Backbone Spike, all this stuff. What are the common denominators amongst those groups?
I would say the biggest thing with that, what I love about those groups is it's a lot of people who want to get better, right? So that's one thing about the SEAL teams. It's great, and there's some really hard chargers and some really amazing people in there that really push you to be the best version of yourself. But the problem with that is that once you get out, a lot of those people tend to kind of rest on their laurels, and they're like, okay, well, I was a Navy SEAL, and that's like their peak, in life. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it is a hard thing to accomplish, and you should be proud of that, and that's awesome. But the way I look at it is, I want Navy SEAL to be a footnote on my tombstone, not the headline.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yep. And so that's what I love about these groups. It's a lot of people at varying levels of success who are continuing to try to get better. Say, like, hey, I'm happy with what I've done. I'm proud of this so far, but I want so much more. And in order for me to get to be so much more, I need to become the type of person that is able to bring these things into my life, right? And a real big part of that is self-awareness and knowing what your strengths and sometimes more importantly, what your weaknesses are, so that you can find people who are better than you at these certain things and learn from them, bring them into your life. Just like a podcast, like your audience has things that you help them with because you're better at it than they are. And that's what all these things are. And I think these entrepreneurship groups are a great way to kind of expand and magnify that, because I mean, you were there at the group, man. Like, everybody in there is somebody who's searching and wanting to do more. And most importantly, somebody who's already pulled the trigger on showing that they want to get better, not just talking about it over beers with their friends. You're like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if this, or, oh, I wish somebody give me a break, or, oh, wishy-washy. Like, no, they actually pulled the trigger, paid the money, drove there. I think you drove, right?
No, I flew. I'm in Iowa.
Yeah, there's some people that flew all the way or drove all the way from the West Coast and the East Coast. And dude, I think that's a huge part of it, is that people don't realize the importance of just taking that first step. People overthink it dramatically.
And stepping outside of your normal social society. I know you mentioned, I was listening to your recent podcast, which your new podcast, Mapping It Out with Ryan and Coda. Roadmap to entrepreneurship is awesome. I think you're on episode 3, 4.
Yeah, 3. We have a few in the queue so far, but yeah, we've released I think 4 now.
Okay, tons of nuggets on there, so check that out, everybody. One of the things you talked about in that was you talked about 2 groups, the EO, which is in San Diego, and then you talked about Arate, the 2 differences. One of the things you mentioned about with EO, and this can be with anything, is one group is, like you said, talking the talk and want to talk about, as I think you said, talked about their wives dealing with their swimming pools or some bullshit.
Yeah.
And then the other group's like, all right, I'm here to talk about business. Let's get stuff done. Let's set some actions and some tangible things in course. What's that like, and how do you find those?
Well, any group is made up of a cross section of, the personality types and the characters involved in it, right? And that's one of the things I really like about Arete is that, Andy Frisell and Ed Milet are both highly aggressive personalities, characters in life and in business. So that has a lot of carryover to the types of people that get involved in that group. So my first, event that I went to there, it was like other like just meat eaters, dude. Like guys who are in it to like, okay, cool. I'm running $1 million company, a $10 million company, $100 million company. I want to run $1 billion company. How do I do that? So the vision stretching was just a massive part of that. And it was a really aggressive growth strategy, which was cool. EO was slightly different. There are people doing really big business in EO as well. And for people that don't know, EO is a much larger group. It's actually worldwide. It's called Entrepreneurs Organization,
Okay.
and they have chapters. They have national chapters, and then broken down by, city, state. And I was in the San Diego chapter, and it was really cool. I learned a lot. It's very structured. It's one of the oldest. I think it is probably the oldest entrepreneurship group around. So it's very put together, very well organized, extremely structured. And there's people in there that have been in there for years and they're super helpful. I mean, they're just some amazing people in there. But I think that their main focus is more, I would say, like balance, right? So if you want to have like a really good business and a really good home life, and like how do you navigate that? How do you bring your spouses on board and get them involved in it? And it was a much more, I don't say holistic, because both are deal with holistic aspect of it, but it was a much more balanced and subtle approach. It just wasn't very aggressive. And for me, especially at that time in my business, this was I think 5 years ago. So we were just like, year 2 into building industry, and I was like super aggressive. I was like, I don't want to know about any of this other bullshit. I don't care about anything. I want to build my business as fast as possible, as big as possible. And how do I do that? What are the tactical like and technical aspects I need to do that? So that's why Arete was very good for me at that stage. But now I think all of them are useful now, because my role in the company as the company has grown, my role has changed a lot. So now that I'm not an operator in the company and like doing more work, if I do more quote work now, it doesn't move the company forward anymore, because I'm not an operator in the company anymore. So now the things that I need to do to move the company forward are much more strategic, like bigger picture stuff, bigger plays, bigger partnerships, thinking like 3, 5, 10 years down the road rather than 3, 5, 10 months down the road.
Yeah. And for those you don't know, he's in apparel and fulfillment. Is that how you describe it? Apparel fulfillment?
Yeah, we do 2 things. So basically apparel production and e-commerce fulfillment operations,
Okay.
like warehousing, all the boring infrastructure stuff that nobody building a brand wants to do.
You've got to figure it out. That's and the other thing is your wife is your CEO. You work with your wife.
Yeah.
I tried that for about a year, and tell me your secrets of how you're able to do that.
Oh man, well I'll tell you straight up, we piss each other off every day. But I think if you're going to work with your spouse or pretty much any partnership, that one of the main keys to a partnership is outlining the roles and responsibilities right off the bat. Because, and as you're building a team too, a lot of people when they're initially starting a company, they're like, because I fell into this as well, like, oh, I need more of me. I need 10 of me. Yep. Like, how much work could I get done if there was 10 of me? Yeah. And when you're an operator in the company, that's true. You just need to do more work. But once we started to gain a team under ourselves and started to get, the company started to get bigger, more infrastructure, more moving parts, I realized that I'm only good at a very select few things in the business world. Yeah. And if I had 10 of me, my company would be like maybe 1% better at those, but I would continue to be absolutely horrible at everything else. So when you're building a team, it's important to shift focus from thinking, okay, I need more of me. You don't. You need people who are different than you. You need people who are strong where you're weak. Like if you're really good at like the creative side and the vision, but you're really bad at the technical side and all the details and things like that and the follow-up, get somebody who's really good at that. And now what you have, you build a team like that where everybody is strong in like one or two areas, the strength of the team as a whole will be massively bigger and better than if I had like 10 of me running the company. We would not be able to do the things we do if I had 10 of me. So that was a big part of bringing Disney on. She was actually the first employee like 5 years ago. And then she was, as we grew, she became COO. And then we moved her up into the CEO position, I think maybe 6 to 9 months ago. And not because she's my wife, because she's legitimately a better CEO, especially for our team than I was. But
When did that opportunity click for you in your mind? Was it back when Navy SEAL training? You're like, all right, this person is bomb at this, person's great at this. All right, what are the steps in analyzing and identifying that in the person?
Oh man, honestly, I feel like a loser because it took me forever. It was like beating me over the head by the time I actually noticed it. This is something I said to everybody when they first come on the team. It's like, look, you can have any position you want in the company. You just have to make yourself the right position. You just have to make yourself the right person for the role, right? And when I first started saying that, 5 years ago, I never thought that would include my own job, my own position as CEO. But it turns out Disney accelerated really well as COO. And so the decisions that I was having to make as CEO, as she, climbed up and kept getting more responsibility and executing on more and more of these operations, I realized that there's not a whole lot that I'm really doing in the day-to-day operations. So by the time she took over as CEO, the only difference between her role as COO and CEO was making the decisions. She was already operating everything. So it was really just a matter of, during that shift, training her in my decision-making process and why I weight and value things the way that I do, so that when she makes decisions, she can make decisions that are very much in line with what I would have done. So that allowed us to kind of like bridge that gap and make that on-ramp very, very smooth for her. But then I was left in a position where, okay, well, she took over my job as CEO and she's better at it than me. What the hell do I do around here? And then that through that process, it really helped me understand the value that I bring to the company and hone in on the things that I can do to move the company forward, which was a whole different thing for me because I'm used to being an operator in the company. I'm used to doing the work.
Yep.
So when I could no longer do the work, I was like, man, what do I do around here?
Twiddle your thumbs and just kind of point directions, whatever.
Yeah, but it was interesting that we actually did a data analysis. We're big on data. So we did a P&L, not just for the whole company, but a P&L for each department. And brand management department was one of our biggest departments. And we had 5 people in there at the time. And we did a P&L for each of our clients as well. And we're like, okay, where do our clients come from?
Mm-hmm.
And over 99% of them came from me, just me going out and talking about entrepreneurship, talking about not even what we do, just helping other people with their businesses and solving problems. And through that process, we just became involved in a lot of conversations. And thankfully, from what we do is apparel production, and apparel is one of the only products that almost every business in the world has. So by default, almost everybody we have a conversation with is a potential client. So we can help these people, even if we're not involved and we're not the best choice for production, even if we can help them scale their business and solve problems, now we become an asset to them and a value add. So now every person that we ever help or have contact with, my goal is to become their number one, help them so much that for the next 10 years, anytime this person has a conversation about apparel, they're like, they might not be your client, but they'll meet somebody who's having these problems. So like, you know what? You need to go talk to Ryan. Ryan helped me out with this stuff. He solved this problem for me. He's the man when it comes to apparel. And now we get all these referrals and we're in conversations with some really cool people that I'm super excited to work with.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about what we do is we get to work with like some really badass entrepreneurs, and it's just a lot of fun.
So was that natural to you to go out and just be willing to help? Because I know some people are so like, I don't want to tell them everything. I can't teach them everything. They got to have something did that just be like, I'm here to help you? Has that always been you?
No, it hasn't always been me at all. When I was first starting out, I was very afraid and worried that people were going to, step on my stuff or start copying me and what I do. But I think that's any business owners, like you're so close to it. And it's just such a personal endeavor for you that it becomes very personal when somebody's like, you know, trying to, what you feel is like stepping on your toes or infringing on your territory or something like that. But one of the things that I think helped me open my eyes up to it was that we work with so many different brands throughout the year that I started to recognize that, okay, all these guys have, or girls have, similar perspective on it. They all have the same problems. And so we just started to recognize these patterns of, well, I think this person's biting off me. I think this person's biting off me. And we would like, look like, well, okay, this design that you think you created, like, did you know, like, here's a picture of the collection, same design 10 years ago. So this person, like last month that you saw doing this thing, is they're not biting off you. Like, they probably don't know who you are. This is just how the creative space and especially apparel works. So, but being able to see so much and see into so many different businesses has really helped us help people, because most apparel brands don't talk to each other because they're all, you know, competition to each other, so to speak.
Yeah.
But they'll talk to us about their problems. So we end up being a hub for a lot of problems, and which means we can apply a lot of solutions, because we'll see how different brands will help them solve problem. So another brand comes to us like, I'm having this problem. We're like, hey, here's what we saw work pretty well before. Have you tried applying this? You know, so we end up having a lot of solutions to a lot of these same problems. And that's how we help brands accelerate and grow, is basically just removing the drag and helping them avoid stepping into a lot of these potholes that can, you know, really derail your progress, especially in the beginning.
Yeah. So one of the questions I'm sure some of the listeners have is how does somebody go from Navy SEAL to getting into apparel and what you do now? How does that happen?
Oh man, dude, honestly, apparel was the very last idea that we had. So I was a buds instructor at the time, third phase, and my roommate was also a buds instructor, Mikey Sowers, great dude. And we were about to get out, you know, like, okay, we got like a year left. Being poor sucks. We don't want to stay in, but what are we going to do when we get out? And we had no idea what to do. We just knew we wanted to do something and have a little more control over our trajectory in our lives. And so we had a whole bunch of different ideas, some really goofy shit sometimes. But the very last idea that we had was a clothing line. And the reason that we settled on that was that we had no other assets or brand recognition, or there was nothing special about us at all, other than that one thing, which is we were Navy SEALs. So how do we, you know, respecting that brand and everybody involved in it, and, you know, just the weight of that carries, how do we respectfully craft this brand that is from the Navy SEAL characters and all the people that we knew, and the work that we did and the work that they did and the conversations we're having, like, how do we create something from that can be brought to a bigger audience, so we can create something from that we find is meaningful and useful and has character and value. And then how do we allow other people access to feel like they're part of our, you know, what our perspective of brotherhood is, what our perspective of teamwork is. Like, how do we craft that? So what we ended up doing was we created an apparel line. It was called Forged, that was like kind of like an unofficial Navy SEAL clothing line. And we donated a lot of money to you know, our friends, and we donated a lot of money for that cause. But it was really the reason that we chose apparel was because it was the only product that we could think of that would allow somebody else to come in and be a part of our community and a part of our ecosystem, and, you know, all the characters and personalities involved in that. And it was really cool. The first couple of years were awesome, man. It was fun. And we almost went out of business so many times and almost crashed and burned a ton of times. But man, we learned a lot those first couple of years, and it was a ton of fun. You know, me and Mikey just not knowing what we're doing, just flying by the seat of our pants, like shit, I don't know, like sleeping 2 hours a night. Sometimes we go to an event, come back at like, you know, 5:30 in the morning, have to get up at 6:30 to go to work. It was I mean, I don't want to do it again. But
You learn the lessons. You don't have to.
Yeah. But I think it is important to understand that is part of the process, though. Like, everybody I've met that has built a significant company has some kind of story of just going through the shit where you're like, fuck man, like, this sucks. I feel like an idiot. Why am I why am I doing this? Why am I having these problems? Like, I shouldn't be having these problems. Everybody else makes it look so easy, and you doubt yourself and you get down on yourself and you start to second guess all your decisions, and just, it slows everything down. Whereas I think looking back, one of the biggest maybe pieces of advice I could tell anybody who's starting in business, or maybe is feeling like that in the first couple of years, is, dude, you're not alone. Like, everybody who's building something feels like that. So it doesn't mean you suck. It doesn't mean you need to quit. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that this is the path that you chose. Yeah. And it comes with some challenges. It comes with, getting punched in the face here and there. And it just is what it is. So don't worry about it. Don't get down on yourself. Don't second guess yourself. Just keep going, keep moving forward, and honestly execute faster, learn faster, and you'll get to where you want to go. You just got to understand that those challenges are part of the process. Yeah. You can't become the type of person that's going to own and run big shit unless you go through those challenges of realizing that you suck at a lot of things. Yeah. And you need to get better at them in order to progress. It's like working out, right? Like the more you work out, the lights don't get weighted. The weights don't get
lighter. I follow. I got you.
Get lighter. You just get stronger. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the same thing with business. Like, it doesn't get easier. Like, you just get better.
And I think that's across the board in all parts of life. I mean, you can talk about business where there's going to be some shitty parts. There's going to be some parts along the way where you have to learn the lesson. Same thing with exercise, same thing with relationships, same thing across the board. Every element, you're going to have a shit phase where you're going to be like, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
And that's where the decision has to come into play. Mentally, are you strong enough to step up and step forward, or are you going to step back and stay in your story versus stepping on your story?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we talked about earlier, back when I was in practice in Tucson, Arizona, we had a large practice. We saw about 700 people a week. It was a large, high volume family practice. And we had coaches who kept telling us, this is what you got to do. You need more. You need more patience. You need more money. You need more. And we just kept going. We just kept going. And all of a sudden you started to notice other things started falling apart. Like your health started deteriorating. Relationships started going your way. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? And then we finally decided we were chasing somebody else's vision.
Yeah.
We weren't shutting back and be like, what do you want? And I know you mentioned that today on your Instagram post. What exactly are you trying to accomplish in this endeavor?
Yeah.
Go through that. Just step by. If you have some steps, man, share them.
Well, I think, dude, awareness is a superpower, man. Like self-awareness. If you can really know yourself, know your strengths, be honest about your weaknesses, it makes it so much easier to figure out what the fuck you need to get to the next level. If you're lying to yourself, like, oh, I'm good at everything. Well, okay, why aren't you a millionaire? Why aren't you a billionaire? You're so good. You don't need to get better. Like, have you achieved your dreams? Have you achieved everything that you mapped out for yourself as far as success? Sorry, being sick. And if the answer is no, then you got to look back and like, okay, well, I do have some things I can work on. What are those things? How do I get better at them? But I think so many people in social media, well, this is true in life, but it's just become more magnified with social media, is that everybody on social media only shows the highlight reel. Right. So everything that I post on my stuff, it's true and it's real, but it's still only the highlight reel. And I try to show a little bit behind the curtain, like, hey, here's something that really happened that was awesome and fun, but also here's the shit that went wrong with it. Here's where I stepped in a pothole. Here's where I screwed up, and here's the lessons that I learned from it. Yeah. And I think too many people only gloss over that, and they look at other people's lives and they don't realize that it's just a highlight reel, and they look at their own lives by comparison and like, dude, this person has a ton of money. They got the girl, they got the guy, they got the car, they got the house, they got everything that you think you want. Mm-hmm. But in reality, what you should be chasing is happiness, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to define for you what success means. Because if you say, okay, I want $1 million, okay, but what makes you happy can be bought with $1 million, then yes, that's a good goal. But if your goal is to have, a quality relationship and, a normal, like, white picket fence and 2.5 kids, like, starting an entrepreneurship journey is probably not the best choice for you because that's a very tumultuous and challenging road. Your best bet, if that's your goal, is just to have a normal, stable, good, happy life. then you should probably work for somebody else. You should probably get a good job and move up and get yourself better and have quality relationships and have balance of like work and life and make your relationships a priority. that's that's how you get to where you want to go with that. That's not that hard to do. You know what I mean? That's why most people are in that realm of, there's nothing wrong with average at all.
Yep.
But if you want something different, if you want something more, now we break out of that shell and we got to really ask ourselves, okay, if I have unlimited direction where I want to go, like 365 degrees, I can go any direction I want. You have to, if you just wander off in a regular direction, you don't really have a plan or a goal or anything, the chances of you actually getting where you want to go are 1 in 365. Say it was 365 degrees around you. So it's really, really unlikely that you're going to end up where you want to go if you have no idea, right? It's like it's Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, where he's asking her, or she's asking, which way should I go? And he's like, well, where do you want to end up? She's like, I don't know. He's like, well, then any way will do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's so important to define for yourself what success means. And I think people get wrapped up with that, where they look at other people's versions of monetary success or things or lifestyle, and they forget to ask themselves if they had that, if that would truly make them happy. So if you chase happiness, I think that's a much more important goal than success, because they are intertwined. Because you don't want to make $1 million and get the car, the house, and all that stuff and then be miserable. Like that.
Yep.
That's not success. Yeah, you achieved your goal, but you chose the wrong goal. You know what I mean? Your goal should be happiness, not monetary success. I personally, the way I look at that is that it comes down to your philosophy on life, right? Like, what do you want out of life is really the big question that everything else should be driven from. I know for me, what I want most out of life is to live it as much and as deeply as possible. So I know for me, that has to do with experiences. So I want to have the maximum number of enjoyable experiences with the minimum number of, negative experiences. So what that means is, okay, if I want to go and, have lunch in France tomorrow with my wife or something and bring some friends, that would be awesome. That'd be a really cool experience. Right. But that ain't cheap. You got to need a private jet, one that's really has long legs. You can go over there. So, okay, what does that require? Okay, that requires money. So money for me is a tool to access freedom. And by freedom, I mean the ability to have any type of experience you want at any time in your life, which rolls back to, I want to enjoy life as much as possible with maximum freedom on my own terms without having to be anywhere I don't absolutely want to be. So in order to do that, for me, that's why I chase money, is because for me, money can buy those experiences and those things that are the ultimate, goal for my life.
Yeah.
That's how I define happiness in my life. Yeah. So for me, money is a big part of that. It's not the only part though, because that doesn't mean I can. Happiness to me also means doing that with my friends and having a great relationship with my wife and having fun and being a good person. Like I want to know that I'm a good person. So that doesn't mean I can go do shady business shit, because I might achieve money and have these experiences, but if I go have lunch in France tomorrow and nobody likes me and I have nobody to go with, like, what, I'm gonna eat a fucking croissant by myself and like, well, that fucking jet sure was fun.
Cool Instagram post. Hey, cool Instagram post.
Right. Yeah, but that's exactly a good Instagram post. But so that's why I think it's so important to like really audit who you follow and who you let into your vision scope, meaning like people that you think are doing a good job, but you think you're ahead of you, or you think are like your version of, or living your version of success. Yep. Like actually look at their life. If they're a good person and that's how you want to be and it's how you want to live, awesome. Then, do more of that. And they're a great person to learn from. But also if that's not where you truly want to go, man, you need to take a step back and find the people who are living life and really doing the things that you want to do, and follow that and chase that. And if that's a normal life with the white picket fence, like, dude, that's awesome. Go do that. You don't have to go do anything else. You don't have to give a fuck about all these things that people are telling you have to care about. You don't have to care about anything at all.
When did you step back and start looking for people that were guiding you and those people out there that were doing what you wanted to do? I mean, it's one thing to follow a person and be like, God, they're doing cool shit. I just want to do that. And then you start stepping in their steps and you start doing exactly their thing. And you're like, shit, this isn't working for me. At what point do you have to step back and be like, okay, who am I? What do I got to do to have what I want to have? Where did that start for you?
Dude, I'm kind of a weirdo. Like I've just always been like that. I remember when I was in like fifth grade, fourth or fifth grade, I was like a kid. I don't know how old you are, like 5 or 6, something like that. I was sitting in class one time and the teacher was telling us to do something that I was like, this is dumb. Like, this isn't gonna help me in my life at all. Why are we even doing this? So I just put my feet up on the desk and I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm like, whatever. And they're like, what do you mean you're not doing it? It's like, this is not gonna help me in my life at all. Like, I'm just not gonna do it. And they're like, what are you talking about? So I don't know, for me, man, I've always just been very super analytical, sometimes, well, mostly to my detriment, because when I was growing up, I've always had kind of like an engineer mentality, like very, very numbers oriented. Like sarcasm was completely lost on me. I didn't know how to be funny. I didn't know how to communicate with people. I had to learn how to be a human, basically, because I was like literally like a robot, you know, and I didn't understand human emotion. So for me, being hyper aware of that stuff, I've always, since I was a kid, since I can remember, I've always had very clear, distinct reasons why I do anything. And I remember thinking in high school, like, man, I was a dork. Like, I don't want to be a dork anymore. These cool kids are having really fun. They're having cooler experiences. They're going to parties. They're experiencing life more than me. I want to go be cool. How do I do that? So I would analyze my friends who were funny and popular. I was like, okay, what is humor, right? I was like, okay, is it the timing? Is it the tone? Is it the content? Is it the context of it? Is it like what defines humor? And I had to learn that, and it was difficult because I crashed and burned a lot of times. I said some goofy stuff as a kid that did not make any sense. And looking back, oh my God, you're such a nerd. But that was me having to learn. I realized that I was not good at being human or being cool or understanding anything about that stuff. And I had to like go back and like a robot analyze it, try it out. But through that process, I ended up, you know, I think pretty fucking funny sometimes. But it really helped me in business too, because I started to understand people better. And past a certain point in business, it's all about the people. Like, you can automate the processes, but you still need people to run the processes. Then you can't treat them like robots. You can't be a robot. You have to be a person to lead people. You have to understand what it is that drives people, understand what it is that people want out of life. So for me, for my life, I've always just been very intentional about why I want the things that I want. So for me, I've never really been lost in that. But on the flip side, that has been a big challenge for me, is to relate to other people who, like, how do I articulate my thoughts on this to somebody who doesn't view the world the same way, right? Like, it is not a direct translation. So that's why, like, when I'm doing these talking at these events or podcasts or things like that, it really helps me get a good grasp on the way that I view the world, and helps me kind of hone that articulation and get better at presenting my perspective on it, so that I can help people with this. Because I don't know, man, like, I don't have all the answers, and I do fuck up a lot of things, but there are a few things that I do that I think if more people did them, it'd be very useful and helpful. And I think a big part of that is just auditing why you give a fuck about things that you're supposed to care about. Like, for instance, like, everybody's like, oh, family, as just an example of this. Like, I have a younger brother and a younger sister. I haven't talked to in 15 years. I don't even have their phone number. Like, my grandma died the other day, a couple months ago. I didn't even go to the funeral. They didn't invite me to the funeral. Like, I have no reason to hang out with that part of my family. They're not bad people. They're totally nice and normal. I just have nothing in common with them. I get zero benefit out of hanging out with my little brother and little sister and everything like that. So it's like, hey, I don't get anything out of this. Very simple equation. There's no value. I'm not gonna spend any time on it. So I haven't talked to them in, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years, something like that. And I'm totally fine with that. And I'll probably never call, I didn't invite him to my wedding. I really don't care. And I think
Yeah.
if more people were really open with themselves and ask themselves, why do you think that you have to care about these things? I think you'd be really surprised that the list of things you actually have to care about is actually very small. It's very small.
So moving forward, what legacy do you want to leave?
Oh, that's a good question, man. To be honest, I don't know. And this is an example of things changing for me because, you know, being 44 now, when I was younger, I was solely focused on the business and just the monetary things, like, you know, like a cyborg, it was just like a
Yep.
robot, just
Yep.
powering through it and running through it and working. But now looking back, I don't think that was the best approach because it was completely unbalanced. And although I was able to achieve, you know, certain things, now looking back, and some of my friends who didn't take that like just balls to the wall approach have great lives and they have kids and they got family. And now I'm looking back 40, you know, 44. I'm like, yeah, you know what? It would be nice to have like, you know, an 8-year-old kid or something like that. But at the time, 8 years ago, I was like, dude, hard no. I just want to work on business. I want to learn. I want to progress. But now, with the perspective I have now, like, shit, man, that's probably not the best. I wish I would have done things a little bit differently, you know. But I think that's the nature of it. Like, you gotta change your goals over time. Otherwise, they're not big enough.
Yeah, and you can't look back all the time either, because then you got a bigger problem.
Yeah, exactly.
What resources could you offer our listeners on success, on mental capacity strengthening, that side of things? Do you have any things that you're like, quotes, books, resources, things like that?
Dude, honestly, social media is the biggest tool for that I've ever seen. Like, just find people who are doing what you want to do, who are really good at, like, if it's mindset, find people who are really good at mindset. And there's different types of mindset, right? So, like,
Mhm.
David Goggins has a different mindset than Andy Frisella, different mindset than Ned Milet. So you can learn something from every one of these people. Whereas 15 years ago, that option and opportunity did not exist. Like, you could not get in contact with these people. You could not learn from them. Now, all these people who are operating at such a massively high level are just putting out stuff for free on the internet, on social media, on YouTube. But because there's so much information out there and you can't possibly absorb it all comes back to that main thing. You got to understand what it is that you really want out of life and understand what your weaknesses are and then work on those weaknesses. You don't have to work on every weakness. There's a lot of things that I'm really not good at that I don't care to get better at because I don't
You've,
need to get better at them.
you've recognized them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've identified a few key things. I need to get better at a couple things that I'm good at. And I need to get better at a couple things that I'm bad at. But the rest of it, it doesn't serve me to spend, you know, 5 hours a week working on something that I don't really need to get better at, that I could hire somebody who's light years better than me at it.
Mhm.
I don't need to understand that. I don't need to operate at a certain level in that. So I think becoming aware of yourself and what you really want, and then finding those people who are doing it, because it's such a unique opportunity to get close to these people. And not even, not, I don't mean close to them as like DM them or be their friend or anything. I mean, just observe them and watch them
Yeah.
and learn from them. Because like I learn, maybe this comes back to when I was a kid and observing like humor, but I watch what people do all the time. And I still learn so much just from observing people. Like, how do they handle opposition? How do they handle challenges? How do they handle when somebody's mean to them? How do they handle when somebody is, you know, super nice to them? Like, how do other people navigate these very normal human experiences? And what can I learn from them to bring into my life to make myself better at the things that I want to get better at?
Yeah. Do you have any routines or habits that you have implemented into your life that help push you?
They're super basic, so I don't know how helpful they would be, but uh, systematizing as much as you can, I think, is huge. So like when I realize now that my role in the company is more big picture based and more conversational based, and it has far less to do with like working on things and emailing these days. So for me, what I look at is before I go to bed at night, I look at the calendar for the next day and what do I have lined up? What do I need to, what can I do at night to make sure that I don't have to think about so many other things and I can focus 100% on the things that I want to perform at, right?
Yeah.
So for instance, you know, we got this podcast today. So I was like, okay, what do I want to wear? Do I need to worry about this? Do I need to worry about that? What do I set up ahead of time? What's my schedule look like ahead of time? Do I have anything that's going to be mentally draining before I go into the podcast? Do I have anything afterwards that is going to be it's going to be on my mind, you know? So I think just planning your day out is super simple. It's nothing crazy. I think Andy has a really good tool called the Power List. It has five key things that you need to do every day. He's spoken a lot about that, but five for me was a lot. So I just got it down to three main things. And it's not like, you know, brushing your teeth or making your bed.
Yeah.
It's very real things that will actually impact your business and move you forward. And I think even just 3 of those things a day can have a huge impact. I think Tony Robbins has a quote. I'm probably butchering it, but something along the lines of like, people overestimate what they can get done in an hour and underestimate what they can get done in 10 years.
Yeah.
But
What do you
also,
do? Go ahead.
I'd say another big thing is just focusing on the long term, like focusing on things I think about now are, what do I want my life to look like in 5 to 10 years? Who do I want to be hanging out with? Who are the friends I want to have around me? Like, what are the things I want to be doing with them? And more, it's like, you know, I love hanging out with our clients, people that we work with, you know, Stuman and Sean Whalen and these dudes, like, and I want to go, you know, in 5 years, I want all our families to go on a private jet and just have a great fucking time in Cabo and not post anything and just have an awesome time together. Like, to me, that's success, is having an awesome life with other awesome people. So for me, when I'm making the decisions that I make now, it's not about, you know, how much money I can make here, how much money I can make there. It's, who do I want to work with, and what do I want my life to look like in 5 years, and what do I want to be spending my time doing, and with who, you know? So yeah, things are different, but I think that's important too. Like, you have to change things as you go.
Yep. 2 final questions. First one is, when you get slapped in the face, when you go to work and all of a sudden you just get kicked.
Oh yeah, every day.
How do you switch? What's your trigger?
Switch to what?
Takes you right back on purpose, as opposed to like, I'm off here. Crap. I gotta recenter. I gotta refocus. Otherwise I'm going to be gone for the rest of the day mentally.
Yeah. Well, I think most of what we do on a day-to-day basis here is just solving problems. So I actually am always in those, because I think it's the problems that pull you back to the reality of like where you're at, right? If you're like daydreaming or whatever, and then somebody's like, we got this problem. You're like, okay, I'm here. Okay. What do we need? But we do have a very specific prioritization process we use for problems, because we deal with them so often. Number one is when we have say we have a production issue, right? So like blanks, or the things got printed wrong, or something blew up in our business somehow. Yeah. Our number one priority is not to find out why it happened or who blamed. We don't worry about that at all. Our number one priority first is to fix it for the client. Like, okay, what can we do to fix this and make sure the client is happy with the product, with the service, with whatever. And we fix it, and that's our sole focus. We don't care whose problem was, who caused it, who anything. Like, how can we solve this 100% from our client's perspective? And once we focus on that, everything else, you know, a backseat, it's real easy to solve those fairly quickly. Mm-hmm. And then once that's solved and we're happy with that, then we take a step back. And we're like, okay, how did this happen? Right? We don't say who, but we're like, what steps in our processes or our procedures or our systems, where is the crack in the foundation where this thing fell through the cracks, right? Like, how? And once we find that, we're like, okay, this is a problem. This is my fault. If it's a problem with the system, that's my fault. I built the system, and I built the team that built the system. So that's awesome, because now I know what to fix. So now we just go in, we change the SOP, we change the system, we change the process, or whatever it is, to make sure that we don't make that same mistake again. And if you do that over a long enough time period, you end up with a really robust system and really strong set of processes, so that you don't typically have things fall through the cracks as much. And then you don't have these things that blow up, and you don't have these issues. The very last thing we worry about is who caused the problem. That's the very, very last thing. And then even if we do that, we're like, okay, mistakes are part of the thing. That's That's just part of the game. It's no big deal if you make a mistake. The only time we really get down on things is if it's somebody's making the same mistake twice, because that's not a procedure or process thing. That somebody is not paying attention. And then I'm like, okay, did I train them wrong? How is this not my fault, but how can I affect change on this? Because that's the only way that you have power over a situation, is if you take someone, if you internalize it.
Yeah.
Like if I was just external, like, oh, this is their fault, this is their problem, everybody else is screwing up, it's just going to keep happening. Because if you absolve yourself of any responsibility, you also remove any power that you have to solve the
Change
situation.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Jocko talks a lot about this. I think is super valuable. But that's kind of how we do it, is we have a very systematized process of how we prioritize things. And it all comes back to the process and the SOPs and how we built our system. So for us, that's kind of how we do it. But mentally, if we're talking mentally, and like, how do you have a negative experience? Like, say somebody has a shitty comment, and like, how do you pull yourself out? How do you move on to the next thing? It's something my mom told me when I was a kid. She's like, if you allow other people to make you feel a certain way, you're giving them power over you. And I thought, okay, it comes back to choosing what you give a fuck.
Yeah.
Like, okay, do I care what this person says? Are they right, first and foremost, right? Because if it's somebody shitting on the internet, like, oh, you suck, I'm like, okay, well, fuck you, like, whatever. I don't know.
Next.
But also too, there can be some golden nuggets in there, because a lot of people who don't give a fuck about your feelings can be super honest with you. So if there are things that I suck at, like, oh, you curse too much, you wear shitty shirts, you wear, whatever it is, I'm like, okay, do I do that? Do I curse too much? Actually, yeah, I probably could, stand a curse a little less. You have crappy taste in shirts. You know what? I don't think so. I love my shirts. I love my brand tees. It's totally fine. But you have to choose like what you care about. But if it's somebody whose opinion I really value, those people are never shitty to you anyway. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But if they have something that's improved that I can improve on, if Andy came to me and like, hey man, like when you're presenting, like you could really use some help with this. I'm like, dude, awesome. Thank you. Like, this is great information for me to know, because I know that I need to get better at it.
Yeah.
But people who don't matter, if you're putting any weight on their opinions at all, you're just going to have a miserable life, because most people are miserable and they just want to drag you down. Yeah. Especially if you're shining any kind of light and you're doing big stuff and you have any kind of like what's perceived as success, dude, people are always going to try to crab pot you back in there and try to pull you down, because your success highlights their lack of it. And they might be going through their life and totally happy with it, but them seeing you succeed, or what they view as succeeding, makes them feel smaller. It makes them feel diminished. And it's like the old saying, like, there's only two ways to get the biggest building in town. You can either build it, you can try to knock everyone else's building down. And most of these people don't want to build anything. They just don't want to be made to feel small, which is, relevant. But at the same time, a lot of these people don't have the self-awareness. They're not aware that they're the ones who are in control of their life. They're the ones who can decide whether they want to do something or not do something. Even down to, so many people say they're caught in, they're trapped, or they made decisions and they're stuck in things. And you always have an option, man. Like, you always have an option. You just might not like the consequences of the options. And that's what hard decisions are. Yep. Like, you have to be willing to take the hits and the repercussions for all your actions. Like,
you choose everything. You choose it all.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Yeah. And life is going to be hard, man. I mean, like,
yep.
there's no version of life that's easy where you're just like, oh man, woke up today, everything's great, had my cereal, wife kissed me, good morning, like, kids love me, house is awesome, work's awesome. Like, dude, that never, you might have like one day
fantasy world. I like it. I'm in.
A month. It's like,
yeah.
And that's not reality. So if you understand that life is going to be hard, no matter what you do, you might as well choose your hard, and go after something that is worth having, rather than just floating through life with like, your sails down and no rudder and no oars in the water, just drifting with, whatever fate has in store for you. Like, that rarely works out. Might as well buy a lotto ticket at that point.
Yep. Last question I have for you. If I gave you the microphone in front of a high school senior class of entrepreneur wannabes, what would you tell them?
Trust yourself. That's one of the biggest things I've learned about business is that it's a lot of work and it is really hard, but it is absolutely not complicated. Most of the business decisions that you'll see they make sense. The right answer is usually pretty intuitive. You're like, hey, these are the two options. This one seems like it makes sense. You're right. That business is not complicated or complex at all. At least initially. Things get complex later. But in the first stage of it, dude, don't overthink things. Just understand that you're not going to have all of the answers or even the right answers. But the only way to get those answers is to take the first step and keep going. So I think if you can trust yourself to figure it out, and be like, hey, look, I know that I don't have the answers, but I'm willing to take the leap anyway to find the answers so that I can get better, so that I can work towards achieving my goals. It all starts with just that first step of just trusting yourself enough to start, and then giving yourself some grace to like forgive yourself when you're not perfect, and forgive yourself if you don't have all the right answers or do all the right things. As long as you keep going and you progress and you try to get better, you will get better. That's the equation.
How it happens. Yeah.
I think too many people sit on the sidelines and just worry about what if, and they worry about all this stuff that doesn't really matter. I think looking back, like what I would tell myself is just trust yourself more, move faster, execute on more decisions, because the ones that are right, you're right about them anyway. And the ones that you're wrong about, you're going to fix pretty fast. And once you find out what's wrong, the solutions will usually present themselves pretty quickly, and then you can move towards solutions. But if you just execute faster and trust yourself to fix things when they don't go wrong, you can execute 100 times faster. If you're sitting on your couch thinking about, well, I don't want to take step 1 because I don't know what step 17 is. Like, nobody does. Nobody, like, everyone is winging it. You just get better. It's like lifting weights. You just get better as you go. You get better at making decisions. You get better at recognizing patterns. You get better at understanding people and processes and your business and where it fits in the world. And dude, I think if more people just understood that there is no right answer, you just have to go for it and figure out what's right for you, I think a lot of people would have a lot more success, and in ways that they define it.
Yeah. And I think that's the only way the country's going to change itself from within.
That's a whole other topic.
That's all. How long we got? What do we got? What is the best place, or where's the best place people can find you?
Instagram's probably the place I'm most active. It's Invictus 5326, and our work one is industry_threadworks. But I'm honestly rarely on that one. I do most everything on my personal Instagram. So, but yeah, if you guys are listening and you have a question about business or life or whatever, just shoot me DM. Don't DM me stupid shit, but it's legit. I'm always looking to get better and learn from people who are doing cool stuff as well.
Cool. And their podcast, is it weekly? Is it weekly, right? Weekly podcast?
Yeah.
Weekly podcast, mapping it out with Ryan and Coda.
Exactly.
If you're entrepreneurs looking for ideas, it's the first 3-4 episodes have been, I've just soaked it all in. So make sure you check that all out. They're filling the world full of nuggets. I love it.
Yeah. We try to be super open and honest about like the entrepreneurship journey and what it really takes. Cause I think too many people put on this glossy exterior of like, you just become an entrepreneur and you make millions, then you have your cars. Like, man, that is not the way that it works.
So thank you very much, Ryan. Everybody, like I said, I'll have all the information in the comments below. Otherwise, have a great day. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Dude, thanks for having me, Dustin. Good talking to you, man.
Good talking.